And what do you plan to give Robotnik Claus for Christmas?
Me? Give you?
Our boy Sonic has gone on a multitude of adventures, and we still have no idea where the blue blur came from, or why he's so fast. I've combed all the lore from the games, and I can't find a single hint of a solid backstory for Sonic, which I believe it's intentional on Sega's part. Maybe it's not important to them, and it isn't crucial to have a happy-go-lucky character like Sonic care about his past. So I guess we'll leave it at that.
Psych!
We're going into all these shitty backstories, children. Yes, I'm covering every Sonic origin story from all those other pieces of media, the comics, the cartoon, the movie. Let's break these down and see if we can find a hint of similarities between them, or if they all sound like fanfic. I'm TheMentok, the Prophet, YouTube's savior, and without further ado, let's head back in time. We'll start this rabbit hole back in 1991 with the release of the very first Sonic the Hedgehog game. Sega of Japan and Sega of America were free to promote the brand new mascot separately. I've covered the story from the Japanese manuals in the Sonic Timeline Part 1, so feel free to go back and check that one out. It was a simple story of a hedgehog saving the world from an evil scientist who sought out powerful gems called the Chaos Emerald. Case closed, right? Well, Sega of America decided to come up with something a little more complex, drafting a document with their concepts of the Sonic universe. These documents are popular in the Sonic community and have come to be known as the Sonic Bible. It details the story of Sonny Hedgehog, raised in Hardley, Nebraska with his mother and 5 sisters. His father, on the other hand, died a gruesome death in a vat of toxic waste while Sonny was a young age. Already this plot is dark. On a lighter note, it details his interactions with the townsfolk and his small town living. As a quick aside, I can only speculate that the creators of the Sonic movie gathered some inspiration from this Bible, as Sonic growing up in a small town in the US seems too spot on to be a coincidence. Anyway, during one of his escapades, Sonny accidentally stumbles into the laboratory of Dr. Ovi Kintabor, who takes a fascination in the young hedgehog. After spending some time together, they become fast friends, no pun intended. And yeah, you can probably see where this is going. Kintabor spends his days looking for special emeralds for his research, working hard to save the planet and rescue any poisoned or struggling animals he discovers during his excavations. Sonny begins working as his assistant, performing all tasks at top speed, gradually being able to reach the speed of sound, leading Kintabor to rename the hedgehog Sonic, for obvious reasons. Sonic's body turns blue after spending so much time running at the speed of sound, so that makes sense to me. So as they spend more time together, Kintabor tells Sonic that he's collecting the Chaos Emeralds to stabilize all the evil in the world by using his reverse quantum bioformulator. Are you guys still with me?
Wake up!
Yes, sir.
Wake up!
Yes, sir.
So for this to work, you have to stabilize the Chaos Emeralds so there'll be no more evil and pollution in the world. Then you launch them into space to get rid of said evil forever. If this process backfires, it could double the amount of evil in the world. So of course, everything goes wrong. A radiation leak in Kintabor's lab causes him to panic and disturb the reverse quantum bioformulator, say that 5 times fast, which casts beams on him, a semi-rotten egg on his counter, and the emeralds. This very specific accident turns the good Dr. Kintabor into a nefarious egg-shaped mad scientist, Dr. Ivor Robotnik. This has Sonic race out of the lab at the speed of light, leaving behind both the new evil doctor and several animals that Robotnik would soon use to power his robots. So wow, that's a lot to unpack, right? Sega of America more or less abandoned this whole plot, but that backstory would serve as the basis for 2 other publications. The first was a promotional comic that was published around the release of the first Sonic the Hedgehog game. This promo comic would be included in several magazines, where they ultimately dropped the entire Sonny Hedgehog and Nebraska idea.
Good.
But they stuck with the relationship between Sonic and Kintabor before the tragic accident. The second publication would be the Sonic Fleetway comics, a British comic series that ran from 1993 to 2002. The Fleetway comics was known for taking certain creative liberties with the Sonic universe, but they would use the Kintabor origin story as well, adding a few details, such as Dr. Kintabor giving Sonic his trademark shoes that were impervious to friction burn, allowing him to reach supersonic speeds. They would further expand this origin story by having the accident orchestrated by a Sonic from the future, who is trying to ensure that Robotnik exists in his timeline so that he could use his evil brain power to save the world from a greater threat.
What a twist!
You know, I actually kind of like that twist. Anyway, so I think we got the most complicated origin story out of the way, so let's move on to the cartoons that used to air back in the 1990s. The most popular at the time is aptly named Sonic the Hedgehog, better known as Sadam to most Sonic fans since it ran on Saturday mornings. Running for 2 seasons between 1993 and 1994, it took a darker, more serious approach with the Sonic franchise, revolving around Sonic and his friends becoming literal freedom fighters that resisted against Dr. Julian Robotnik, who already ruled over their kingdom. And this design is quite horrifying in my opinion. This plotline would be based on concepts from the Archie Sonic comics that debuted in 1992, which in all honesty I'm a little too intimidated to cover in this video, but my day of reckoning is coming as a Sonic YouTuber.
I'm straight. Stay tuned.
The cartoon version of our boy is raised by Sir Charles Hedgehog, aka Uncle Chuck, in the kingdom of Mobotropolis. As a young hedgehog, Sonic makes friends with Sally Acorn, a squirrel, who is the princess of the kingdom, and they become fast friends. Again, no pun intended.
Man, shut your bitch ass.
A few years later, Dr. Robotnik will execute his takeover and usurp the king, transforming Mobotropolis into Robotropolis. Clever Doctor. This takeover causes a majority of the population to be turned to robots, while Sonic and a bunch of other children, Sally included, managed to escape to Knothole Village, where they would become the Freedom Fighters, who are destined to push back against Robotnik's rule. A little off topic, but I believe the plotline to this show had a lot of potential. This probably served as inspiration to the plot of Sonic Forces as well, where Sonic and his friends have to defeat Eggman after his global takeover. Though I give it a 6 out of 10 for story execution. Maybe I'll make a separate video on Sonic Forces in the long run. There would be another Sonic cartoon that ran in the 90s, Sonic Underground, which took place in a separate universe to Sadam, but carried similar elements. In this universe, Sonic is the son of Queen Alina, who is the ruler of Mobius. She is overthrown by this world's version of Dr. Robotnik, and is forced to give her children up to different families to avoid them being pursued by the Doctor. Sonic is later joined in this series by his sister Sonia and brother Manic, who go on a relentless search for their mother while being hunted down by Dr. Robotnik and his minions, Sleet and Dingo. A prophecy foretells that once all 4 are reunited, they would work together to end Robotnik's rule once and for all. This prophecy is wrong, since the show was cancelled before they could even find their mother. False prophets out here telling lies, man. Beware of these people. So this origin story for Sonic is rather interesting to me, since not only does it put him in a position of royalty, he also has siblings, which we don't see make an appearance in any other Sonic media, except the Archie comics, which we're not covering in this video. Right, let's move on. Another Sonic cartoon known as The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was running in the early 90s, which starred Sonic and Tails in their lighthearted escapades to thwart Robotnik's evil plans. There's no real origin story to discuss here, but I figure since I mentioned the other cartoons, I might as well mention the existence of this one. So fun fact, Sally Acorn makes an appearance as Sonic's girlfriend in a Christmas episode of this show. I don't see this mentioned too much, so hopefully you can take that fact away and do something with it in your mundane lives. The final Sonic cartoon I'll cover is Sonic X, a Japanese anime that debuted in April 2003. This is where the whole gotta go fast meme came from, by the way, if you weren't aware. In the Sonic X universe, Sonic and his friends are battling with Dr. Eggman, and due to his manipulation of the Chaos Emeralds, are wrapped up in an accident that sends them to planet Earth. Here, Sonic is taken in by the Thorndikes, a very well-off family that help them adapt to life on Earth, while Sonic continues to stop Dr. Eggman's plans and find a way home. While Sonic doesn't have an established origin story in this series, the lore is heavily based off the Sonic Adventure games that were released shortly before this. This included 2 major arcs that were adaptations of the events of both Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. So I want to throw in a theory of mine into the mix, which requires some knowledge of the Sonic Adventure 2 plot to follow. If you're not well versed on that, I recommend checking out part 2 of my Sonic timeline, where I go over those events. No machines, no gods, just him and his gun and a bot. Because I'm pretty sure I explain it like no one else really does. There's a scene in episode 37, Robotnik's Revenge, where 2 human characters are interviewing the ex-gun soldier who gunned down Maria Robotnik on the space colony arc 50 years prior. The soldier reminisces on Maria's last moments, where he is commanding her to take her hands off a lever, one that ultimately releases Shadow the Hedgehog into space and towards Earth in an attempt to save his life. She is shot by the soldier, who mistakes this as an act of aggression, and while this event is somewhat similar to the games, the anime makes a strange emphasis on showing 2 capsules falling to Earth instead of 1, in multiple shots, mind you. I always believed the writers wanted to hint that there were 2 experiments on the space colony Ark that Maria attempted to save. Shadow, the ultimate life form, and perhaps Sonic? Another prototype or later version of Dr. Gerald Robotnik's experiments? It would have been a nice twist if the show somehow went with this theory, and I wanted to include it as a possible origin story for Sonic, even though I have zero evidence to back up this claim. It's pretty nice to think about, right? Last but not least, we have the newest origin story in the Sonic universe, the Sonic movie backstory. And as a heads up, this segment will include spoilers for the Sonic movie. I consider this movie to be a separate continuity, and while the origins of Sonic aren't completely fleshed out yet, there are some interesting inclusions in his backstory. Sonic is shown as a baby on a distant planet with mysterious powers that allow him to reach supersonic speeds. These powers are sought after by a clandestine tribe, which are definitely echidnas by the way. I'm super curious to see where they're going to take this in the sequel. His mother figure in the movie is an owl named Longclaw, who we don't see in any other form of Sonic media except the Archie comics. Just kidding, she's not in those either. Thank God. Once the Echidna tribe tracks them down, Longclaw gives Sonic a bag of rings that allows him to take portals to other worlds, and thus he escapes to Earth at a very young age. From there, the movie continues with him living in isolation and observing the townsfolk of the small town of Green Hills, Montana. See, we've come full circle. It may not be hardly Nebraska, but it's got the same energy. And after the events of the movie, there's an ending credit scene with Tails arriving on Earth through a similar ring portal searching for Sonic. Now, assuming Tails came from the same world as Sonic, does time move faster in that world than on Earth? Tails isn't mentioned at all by Sonic in the movie, so I'm assuming they've never met before. So if they return to Sonic's world in the next movie, will crazy amount of time have passed, leading into a plotline with Knuckles being a descendant of that Echidna tribe? Who sent Tails to find Sonic in the first place? Was it Longclaw? Did Chief survive her encounter with the Echidnas? Is Tails there to have Sonic help with some other kind of threat? While I love the Sonic movie introduced the dynamic and rivalry between Sonic and Eggman, I am more intrigued by the possible plot lines of the sequel and how it may wrap up the ongoing questions of Sonic's origin. So look forward to April 2022, my children.
You thought you could trick me with that fake emerald, didn't you?
So, how did you know it wasn't the real one?
Tails! Because you just told me, foxboy.
We talk about Sonic a lot on this channel, but how often do I bring up his best friend and most reliable partner, Miles Tails per hour? Yeah, that's a pun. Miles per hour. Anyway, Tails is a character that has gone through miles of character development and had all that retracted in one line.
Sonic, help me!
Come on now, dawg.
Okay, so let's try and dig for the humble beginnings of our favorite two-tailed fox, how he met Sonic, and what he was doing before their fateful encounter. Miles Tails per Hour first debuted in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Master System in October 1992, which theoretically could serve as a prequel for Sonic 2 for the Genesis, but let's leave the timeline out of this. In this version of Sonic 2, Tails is being chased by Dr. Eggman, and is ultimately kidnapped, which sets the stage of Sonic's adventure to collect the Chaos Emeralds and rescue Tails. Sonic gets through the entire game and Tails is saved, solidifying their friendship forever. Unless you don't collect all the Chaos Emeralds and you get this bad ending, where it looks like Tails is actually killed off.
Even though Tails is alive here, it doesn't change the fact that Tails dies in Sonic Forces.
Dark plots aside, this is one rendition of a very similar story. In Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Genesis, the manual states that after the events of his last adventure, Sonic moves along to a location called West Side Island, using his plane, the Tornado. Once Sonic arrives, he's followed by a shy, curious fox cub, who would avoid interactions with him whenever Sonic spotted him lurking in the shadows. Tails was the subject of bullying due to his two tails.
And I decided to try and figure out who exactly these bullies were, so we can cancel them on Twitter.
And while I can't find their names and social security numbers to dox them on the internet,
we're gonna have to dig a little deeper to figure out where Tails is actually from. So let's table the Sonic 2 plotline for a little bit and go further down this rabbit hole. While you would assume he's a resident of West Side Island, where he initially meets Sonic, A game known as Tails Adventure, released for the Game Gear in 1995, gives us a look at Tails' life before his encounter with Sonic. The Japanese version of the manual cites that the game is a prequel to Sonic 2 and takes place on a tiny paradise known as Coco Island. Until further stated, we can assume this is where Tails was born and lived until migrating to West Side Island. So in this game, Tails is relaxing in his research lab, known as Tails' house, until a giant explosion and hellfire wake him up. Yeah, just imagine just being woken up to that. This random invasion is by the Imperial Battle Cuckoo Army, who decided to go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and take control of the island, led by Great Battle Cuckoo the 15th, who is going after the Chaos Emeralds. Makes sense? Anyway, Tails defeats Cuckoo the 15th, who looks a lot like Jet the Hawk, by the way.
I don't want your pity, nor do I need it.
Maybe they're related. And after all of that, Tails heads home to finish building his cat fox robot. I mean, how can anyone bully this dude? He's so wholesome. Okay, so we fast forward back to Sonic 2, and after spending his time trying to catch up to Sonic's speeds, Tails learns to use his tails to propel himself to keep up with the blue blur. So this feat alone has Sonic warm up to him a little in the process, and Tails even works on the tornado, showing his intellect in machinery and robotics. During this moment, Eggman arrives on the island in search of the Chaos Emeralds, and this iconic duo sets out on their first journey together, and the rest is history. So surprisingly, this version of events is the most consistent backstory used for Tails to this day. There's a brief moment in Sonic Adventure where Tails reminisces on the time where he attempts to catch up to Sonic's amazing speed. It's in this game where he learns to be more independent of Sonic and bring his own skills and intellect to the forefront to be a hero himself.
You fool. Away, before I make mincemeat out of you.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I can do this!
This spills over into Sonic Adventure 2, where he sees himself as the fox that needs to step up if Sonic is not around to save the day.
Sonic is asking for the first time to do something for him. I won't let him down. I won't give up!
A perfect character arc for Tails, especially with the context of him growing up as a shy, bullied fox cub from Coco Island. And then this happens in the latest game.
Sonic, help me!
Come on, man.
And what about the other Sonic media? And let's start with an easy one, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. A cartoon from back in the 90s responsible for a meme that will never die. It was a lighthearted take on the characters that often had Sonic and Tails making a mockery of Dr. Robotnik in every episode. But surprisingly, there's a small origin story for Tails here as well. Orphaned at a very young age with no relation to his family, Tails is found by Sonic after being thrown out of a bird's nest, falling right on top of Sonic's head. Tails mistakes Sonic for a bird during his interaction, and Sonic decides to extend a helping hand to him, raising him and becoming his best friend. So in a weird way, Sonic is kind of his foster father in this?
What a twist!
Similarly, in the Sonic the Hedgehog TV series, also known as Saddam, Miles is treated more as the younger brother figure. He's another survivor of Dr. Robotnik's hostile takeover of the planet Mobius, and is a part of the Freedom Fighters organized by the residents of Knothole Village. His involvement is less focused upon in this TV series, with Sonic's main partner in crime being Sally Acorn, ex-princess of Mobitropolis. Instead, Tails is described as much younger than the other fighters, and is left behind for many missions for this reason. It's heavily implied that Tails is going to have a larger role in this series, as a full member of the Freedom Fighter team, but due to its early cancellation, we may never know what was going to become of our Foxboy. Alright, so I've stalled enough. I guess it's time to talk about the comics. More specifically, the Archie comic. If you're a longtime follower of this channel, you know I do everything in my power not to have to read this super long-running comic series. Nothing against the series in general, it's just kind of like people who want to start watching One Piece right now. But seriously, go read that. So in the Sonic Archie comics, Tails' parents are actually named. He's the son of Amadeus and Rosemary Prower. The origin story begins on a very similar note to the Saddam TV series, where Dr. Robotnik begins his conquest of Mobius, and in the process, Tails is orphaned before truly knowing his parents. He's raised in Knothole and becomes friends with Sonic, having a much closer relationship as friends in the comic than in the TV show. So at some point, Tails is reunited with his parents, who, as it turns out, were not killed in Dr. Robotnik's takeover. They were saved by an alien race known as the Bem and lived in space in the meantime? I mean, if you think that's wacky, Tails also gets a love interest called Fiona Fox, who turned out to be a robot made by Dr. Robotnik. Then it's revealed that that robot was based on a real Fiona Fox who's still a villain, and to make matters worse, Sonic dates Fiona, so Tails could get over his crush on this robot? I feel like that's just a big excuse on Sonic's part. But you guys see why it's difficult for me to cover this comic book series. Moving on to other wacky comic series, Sonic the Comic, also known as the Fleetway Sonic Comics. So similarly to the games, Tails does meet Sonic in Emerald Hill Zone on West Side Island, but he's not from the planet Mobius. Oh boy, I need a drink. So Tails goes through a space warp to reach Emerald Hill Zone and stops there because he thought that Emerald Hill Zone was actually made of emeralds. So in this one greedy gesture, he meets his BFF Sonic and decides to stay on that planet. And I'm super hesitant to call them friends because Sonic is an absolute jerk to Tails in this comic. I have no idea why Tails would stick around for this level of abuse. This is not the Sonic you know and love. I mean, any opportunity Sonic gets to berate Tails or make a joke at his expense, he will do so. I mean, look at this panel. Tails is expressing concern that Sonic is rushing into a trap, only for Sonic to say that if he dies in the process, this is how you'll remember Tails, as a little two-tailed dimwit who's always whining. Holy shit, this is a toxic friendship.
Sensational.
Anyway, as this comic goes on, Tails becomes a more prominent hero, understanding his worth and returning to his home in whatever space-time pocket he's from. Known as the Nameless Zone, he is celebrated as a hero based on letters he'd sent back to his home, depicting himself as the one saving the day most of the time, rather than Sonic. Yeah, take that, you asshole. And while Tails tries to take responsibility and correct this case of mistaken identity, it's too late, forcing him to constantly defend his home from time to time in an enchanted suit of armor equipped with a sword. I kind of like this depiction because it's so different from anything I've read about Tails before, but this comic is known for not being afraid to break boundaries. Last but not least, we have Sonic X, the anime from 2003, and personally, my favorite Sonic anime series up to this point. Sonic X does stick to the original origin of Tails that's depicted in the games. In fact, a lot of Sonic X rolls with the assumption that these characters are mostly as they are in the games up to that point, which would have been Sonic Adventure 2. Tails takes the role of Sonic's closest friend, but he's mostly independent in the series, normally using his intellect to solve problems in ways that Sonic can't. The series takes a major switch up in its final season, pitting Sonic and his friends against an evil known as Metarex, taking their fight into outer space as they assist a girl named Cosmo to save the galaxy. And while Sonic performs his usual heroics, the show majorly focuses on Tails and his growing romantic relationship with Cosmo. In the season finale, this relationship boils over into the final fight where Tails is forced to shoot Cosmo while she uses her abilities to fuse herself with the enemy. This final shot, with the help of Super Sonic and Super Shadow, is a sacrifice that they needed to save the galaxy, while Tails can only mourn the loss of Cosmo. And many fans of Sonic X view this season positively, because not only does it give a more mature outlook on the cast of characters, it gives Tails a major character arc that isn't overdone and expands on his growth as a hero, independent of Sonic. And after all of that, we get this in the most recent game.
Sonic, help me!
I was just about to consume this delicious banana. Tasty.
So you all were asked which character's origins you'd like to see next, and I'd say the vote for our favorite evil genius was unanimous. There's so many versions of Dr. Eggman across all Sonic media, so of course, we're gonna crack them apart and make an omelet out of it.
Man, shut your bitch.
Dr. Eggman's definitive origins are just as mysterious as our boy Sonic's. Let's first go back to the original Sonic trilogy, where we see the first appearance of Eggman. Happy 30th, by the way, Eggman. No one really gives you any fanfare for this. Anyway, in the first Sonic the Hedgehog title, the Japanese manual only states that the mad genius Dr. Eggman is on a quest to locate the Chaos Emeralds after learning of their existence. While Sonic is visiting South Island, He sets out on a journey to thwart Eggman's nefarious plans, and that's pretty much it.
I can't
But is that all we
believe
truly
this.
know about Eggman in the main timeline of the games?
No.
There's a little bit more, but we wouldn't find this out until 2001 on the release of Sonic Adventure 2. Before we get into that, I think I should take the time to clear the air on Dr. Eggman's proper name. Why is he called Eggman now and not Robotnik? Why are people still debating this after all these years? When the character was originally conceived, the round shape of the Doctor was the major influence on the name they decided in Japan, which was Dr. Eggman. The name Eggman was used for the Japanese lore, but the overseas market made the official name Dr. Ivo Robotnik to further highlight his ability to create robots. This is why we still see egg-themed levels and branding in the original games. On the flip side, Japan wouldn't use Robotnik for the character until some of the Western cartoons were being localized for the region. This led to a unification of both names during the release of Sonic Adventure in 1999, with Eggman being used as the character's moniker.
I am Dr. Robotnik, the greatest scientific genius in the world.
Whatever you say, Eggman.
Looks like they're going the same route for the Sonic movies as well, with Robotnik being his true name as he slowly morphs into the Eggman that we're used to within the video game continuity. Now that that's out the way, we move on to Sonic Adventure 2, where we get a teensy bit of character lore for Eggman with the introduction of Gerald Robotnik and Maria Robotnik, Eggman's grandfather and cousin respectively. The game's plot is heavily centered around Gerald Robotnik's ultimate creation, Shadow the Hedgehog, and tragic events occurring at the space colony Ark 50 years prior, which leads to the arrest and execution of Gerald Robotnik and the death of Maria. To this day, we're not exactly sure how these events related to Dr. Eggman himself, or if he's even met his grandfather and Maria. While the credits roll, Eggman mentions that he looked up to his grandfather and wanted to be just like him, which, depending on how y'all feel about our boy Gerald here, I'd say he achieved that goal. After this game, we haven't really gotten much else about Eggman's origins, and similar to Sonic, I feel these types of plot points don't exactly matter to Sonic Team. I'm all for their origin stories being a mystery, but I would love a few hints about their lives before being arch nemesis. Speaking of which, it's worth mentioning that during the creation of the original Japanese Sonic plot in the early 90s, Sega of America decided to westernize the origin story into something a little more complex. Since Mentok already covered most of this in his origin video on Sonic, which you should definitely check out if you haven't, I'm gonna give the short version of this as it would be pretty important to other forms of Sonic media later on. To market the release of the original Sonic game, a promotional comic was created for release in certain publications, depicting a character known as Dr. Ovi Kintobor. Kintobor was a friendly scientist who attempted to use an invention called the Retroorbital Chaos Compressor, which would utilize the Chaos Emeralds to absorb all the evil in the world. He befriends Sonic, who stumbles upon his lab, and it's Kintobor who creates his iconic frictionless red and white shoes. Of course, this all goes to shit when the Chaos Compressor backfires after Kintobor spills his drink on it, causing all the evil to enter the good doctor, transforming him into the evil egg-shaped doctor, Dr. Ivo Robotnik. This backstory would eventually be dropped altogether, but we all know that the Sonic multiverse doesn't stop here. It's time to get into the
juicy stuff, y'all.
I'm gonna blow the dust off the 90s Saturday morning Sonic cartoon aptly named Sonic the Hedgehog, though it's known in the fandom as Sadam for short. This would be the cartoon that would depict Dr. Robotnik as a ruthless leader, taking a much darker approach to his character. In this universe, he's known as Dr. Julian Robotnik, and at the beginning of this series, has total control over the planet Mobius for 10 years, with Sonic and his friends pushing back against his rule as the resistance group, the Freedom Fighters. Julian Robotnik was in fact the understudy of a wizard named Nagus, who taught Julian of a mysterious dimension known as the Void. And in an act of treason, Julian betrays Nagus by sending him into the Void and sealing him within. Robotnik then goes on to become Warlord Julian, who fights for King Acorn during the conflict called the Great War. At the end of this war, King Acorn, who is Princess Sally's father by the way, intends to dismantle the army and proposes that Julian leads the Ministry of Science. Now, as you probably guessed, Julian is plotting to oust our boy King Acorn here with his nephew Snively, and in the near future, he does exactly that, transforming a majority of the population into robots to do his bidding. The exception to this were all the children who fled into the nearby forest to escape, eventually becoming the individuals that formed the Freedom Fighters. While this show never saw more than 2 seasons, the head writer of the show, Ben Hurst, has said they intended for a deeper backstory for Robotnik, documenting him traveling to the current time in Mobius from the past. The twist would be that Mobius is actually Earth in the very distant future, with Robotnik and Snively coming from the year 2200, before the animals ruled the Earth. So it's like futuristic sci-fi on top of sci-fi. I've always wondered how far they planned on taking this series, as a lot of the plot points seem way ahead of their time, before TV executives realized that children care about storytelling in their cartoons. Now let's move on to the Archie comics. Nothing against these comics, but there's just so many of them. Longtime viewers of this channel know we make any excuse not to read them. So in these comics, there are actually 2 incarnations of Dr. Robotnik. So let's start with the first one and work our way down this rabbit hole without confusing ourselves. The original Robotnik in the Archie comics is born as Julian Kintabor of the House of Ivo. The parents of Julian are from 2 separate human tribes on the planet Mobius, one being part of the Overlanders tribe, and the other of the humans that live in Station Square, the city where Sonic Adventure takes place. The Overlanders are 4-fingered humans, who at one point were the dominant species in Mobius, back when it was called Earth over 3,000 years ago. Okay, I'm sidetracking here, but listen to this. The Overlanders fought in a huge war called the Great War, with mutated creatures that were created from genetic bombs that alien invaders dropped on the planet. These creatures were animals that possessed a huge amount of human DNA, transforming into the anthropomorphic creatures that rule over Mobius in the present day of the comic. Yes, this is the origin story of the ancestors of all the Sonic characters in the Archie comic. Wild. Anyway, so Robotnik grew up among the Overlanders near the present day, where he plotted for greatness at an early age. Through sabotage and manipulation, he steps on all the Overlanders that gets in his way, and he even went as far as using living humans to test his war machines. Once the Overlanders figure out his nefarious deeds, they intended to imprison him, with Julian fleeing into the Badlands instead. There he's discovered by Jules, Sonic's father in the Archie comics, and Sir Charles, Sonic's uncle. They bring him back to King Maximilian Acorn, who welcomes Julian with open arms as he agrees to fight for the king against their opponents, the Outlanders. Do you see how my boy Julian is playing 5D chess here? From there, the plot unfolds similarly to the Saddam cartoon, with Julian usurping the kingdom and making Mobius his own, transforming most of the characters into robots while he's at it. From there, the series progresses with Sonic and the Freedom Fighters taking on Robotnik's evil dictatorship, in a story arc known as Endgame. No, not that one. This Robotnik has one final clash with Sonic, attempting to use his weapon, the Ultimate Annihilator, to take Sonic down. Turns out his nephew Snively sabotaged the damn thing, and Robotnik's particles scatter into the wind, killing off this version once and for all. So where does the other Robotnik come in? Well, while the Freedom Fighters are rebuilding Mobius after defeating the original Robotnik, another mysterious being begins interfering with the planet. They discover the being is an entity known as Robo-Robotnik, an alternate version of their own Robotnik from another universe. So now that we opened up the multiverse, the plot goes crazy. In Robo-Robotnik's universe, he actually manages to defeat Sonic, but of course, this wasn't enough for this version of the Doctor. He goes after Sonic and the Freedom Fighters in the main universe, and unlike his own world, he's quickly thwarted, his robot body destroyed in the process. Unbeknownst to Sonic and his friends, Robotnik has the ability to transfer his consciousness from his robot body and into a body made in the likeness of Dr. Eggman from the adventure game that were released around that time, eventually changing his name fully to Dr. Eggman. This becomes the Eggman that's seen in the comics until they were discontinued in 2017. So I hope that origin story didn't make your head spin, but you probably are starting to realize why I avoid the Sonic Archie comics. The next few forms of Sonic media will be a little less in-depth with Dr. Eggman's backstory, but I think there's some interesting bits here to discuss. First up is the Sonic the Hedgehog manga that I've never really talked about before. It was published by Shogaku Yonensei in the early 90s as a standalone story. In this story, Dr. Eggman actually takes an interest in Sonic himself, rather than the Chaos Emeralds or other sources of power. He's interested to figure out what makes Sonic tick, and how he's able to harness the powers of Sonic for his own use. I may talk about this entire manga in a separate video, as it details Sonic living a normal life as a hedgehog named Nicky, but also being able to transform into the hero Sonic the Hedgehog as a totally different identity. It's fun stuff, and I think the obsession that Dr. Eggman has over Sonic's power is kind of alluded to in the current movie series. Then there's the 90s cartoon Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, a more lighthearted take on the series with a more slapstick Bugs Bunny versus Elmer Fudd type of relationship between Sonic and Robotnik. He has no true origin story in this cartoon to speak of, and pretty much has a different plan to take over Mobius in each episode, which is aptly thwarted by Sonic and Tails every time. He's joined by Scratch, Grounder, and Coconuts as his main robotic sidekicks, as he strives for a higher level of villainy. Funny enough, there's one episode called Best Hedgehog that dives into his past as a teenager, where he attempts to win over his crush, Lucinda, at his high school. He goes as far as trying to off the man that she has a crush on, and he's somewhat successful. It's revealed that he held this man captive for decades until Sonic was able to free him. Also, his mom appears a lot in this show, and it's very unnerving. We also have Sonic Underground, another cartoon from the 90s, with this version of Robotnik being very similar to the Saddam cartoon. Though we have less of an idea of where he comes from, he overthrows Sonic's mother, Queen Alina Hedgehog, from the throne and takes control of Mobius. He leaves the nobility of the planet alone during his rule, allowing them to pay tribute for lenience. Most of his time in the show is spent making sure his rule is uncontested, searching for Queen Alina and her 3 children in the process to avoid a prophecy of overthrowing his dictatorship. The show was cancelled pretty quickly, so unfortunately, we never see that prophecy come to pass. Sonic X is an anime that was released in 2003, which for the most part sticks pretty close to the lore of the games at the time. There are slight variations throughout, but character-wise, the personalities of the main cast are pretty consistent with the games. Dr. Eggman in particular is still Sonic's arch-nemesis, with no origins to truly discuss. In the very first episode, he uses a machine that utilizes the Chaos Emeralds to perform Chaos Control, which transports the entire main cast to an alternate dimension, or planet Earth in this case. They spend most of the time saving the day from Eggman's plans while trying to find a way home. Season 2 of this show takes the story from Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 and adapts them into its own story arc, where we learn that Dr. Eggman was actually born on planet Earth, where the main cast is stuck. This revelation occurs around the same time his grandfather, Dr. Gerald Robotnik, is introduced into the story, since he's the scientist who created Shadow the Hedgehog on the Space Colony arc. Though it isn't exactly explained how Dr. Eggman ended up in Sonic's world, the assumption is that he was somehow transported there at a very early age. By the way, this is unrelated, but I find it funny that they call him Dr. Huevo in the Spanish dub of this.
¡Nudillos! ¡Atrápalo! ¿Es huevo?
Shout out to my Latin viewers out there. I want to give an honorable mention to a video by Moogie Mikey that was released a few years ago called His History Revealed, a Dr. Robotnik biography. It's an extremely well done narration of how Eggman becomes the mad scientist he is by taking some inspiration from a lot of the lore I've presented to you and adding its own creative liberties. It goes into the tragic relationship with his father and past romantic relationships that slowly tear apart this innocent human being into a psychotic villain. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. It's at 1 million views at the recording of this video, so I suppose everyone else liked it too. Last but not least, let's talk about the newest incarnation of Robotnik from the Sonic movie played by Jim Carrey. In the movie, Sonic flees to planet Earth by using a special set of rings that allows him to transport to different worlds. Heading to Earth at a young age to avoid mysterious captors, he stays hidden from the human race for quite a few years, spending a lot of time in isolation using his supersonic speed. One day, in his frustration, he releases a significant amount of energy, knocking out the power grids in Green Hills, Montana, which has the government step in to investigate. They hire Dr. Robotnik to resolve the issue quickly, and while his origins aren't explicitly shown, Robotnik has a tendency to monologue a few times, revealing more about his past. We learn that he grew up as an orphan, and was bullied in school, which explains his distaste for family and other human beings for that matter. After being punched in the face by a bully, he enacts revenge by utilizing the power of robots, which left the bully eating through a straw for an entire year. From there, he obtains 5 PhDs and is employed by the US government due to his godly talents in robotics. In the course of this movie, we start to see Robotnik grow even madder during his pursuit of Sonic, doing whatever is necessary to find the source of his speed. In their final confrontation, he's knocked into a ring portal, transporting him to a mushroom world where he completes his transformation into Dr. Eggman. shaving his head bald and beginning his journey to find a way home. The next movie comes out in April 2022, and I'm really looking forward to see where they take this version of our beloved Doctor, as Jim Carrey plays a convincing version of him, especially in his final scene of the movie.
I will continue my research on Project Shadow and have a follow-up report very shortly. Just a reminder, don't touch my Sonic.
Yes, one of the OGs of the Sonic franchise. I must say I haven't given Amy much attention considering she's featured in a myriad of Sonic media. She started as a minor character with a major crush on Sonic the Hedgehog, but over time has built up into something much more. Welcome to the TheMentok channel, my children. This is a newly branded segment I'd like to call Origin Oracle, where I'll do a deep dive on the origins of various video game characters, and possibly more. And of course, I'm starting with the Sonic franchise. Without further ado, let's discuss the true origins of our favorite pink hedgehog, Amy Rose. The beginnings of Amy Rose are rather unique, as her debut wasn't exactly in a Sonic game. Many of you are probably aware she was first seen in-game in Sonic CD, released in 1993. But the name Amy, in fact, was first included in the Sonic the Hedgehog manga series published in Shogaku Yonensei in the early 90s. I mentioned this manga in my Eggman Origins video, so if you haven't seen that one, be sure to check it out. The manga is completely separate from the story in the Sonic games. It focuses on a hedgehog named Nikki, a normal, nerdy hedgehog that can unconsciously transform into the superhero Sonic the Hedgehog. In these stories, Amy is the girlfriend of Nikki, and her design is quite different from what we eventually get in the games. She actually has a ponytail and is brown in color, until this design was updated in later publications of the manga series. She's frequently harassed by the local bully Anton Baruka, who seeks the key to her heart, which often requires Nikki to transform into Sonic to properly deal with him, aka
beat the shit out one of these niggas, boy.
This is probably one of the only pieces of Sonic media where Amy is actually in an official relationship with Sonic. But come on, Sega, you know you shipped this. Before we get into the games, I think it's important to discuss Amy's creation as a character. It started with a request from Sega's licensing business at the time, looking for a mini to Sonic's Mickey for that extra money. But similarly to how I've mentioned in previous Sonic videos, Sonic was designed as a character to stay away from the damsel in distress formula that Mario was captaining at the time. They decided a one-way relationship between Amy and Sonic was better, which led to the famous unrequited love that we see throughout a majority of the franchise. Naoto Oshima once again took point on designing the character with the help of Kazuyuki Hoshino, who would go on to be one of the lead art directors for many Sonic titles in the future. They based her features off of qualities they looked for in women at the time, with the hairband and sneakers representing Oshima's interests, while her mannerisms and traits Hoshino admired. And that brings us to Amy's game debut Sonic the Hedgehog CD, released for the Sega CD in 1993. Prior to the events of Sonic CD, Amy is seemingly already familiar with Sonic. I suppose the implication here is that he's already somewhat famous for his heroic deeds in the previous game. It specified that she's a fan of tarot cards and other occult-style practices, and these tarot cards tell her that she will have a destined encounter with Sonic if she goes to the Little Planet, the setting for the game. And of course, being a huge fan of cancers, Amy rushes over to the Little Planet to meet the boy of her dreams. Little does she know, Eggman has nefarious plans for that same planet, and while she gets to meet Sonic briefly, much to his chagrin, she's nabbed by the Doctor's latest invention, Metal Sonic. Also his first appearance, by the way. Sonic, of course, manages to save her and stop Eggman's plans, saving Little Planet in the process. But in these cute little animations for the game, you can see Sonic clearly takes no interest in her. Fun fact, she possesses the nickname Rosie the Rascal in early Sonic media in Japan, but that was later dropped. Meanwhile in the West, Sega of America wanted us to believe this was Princess Sally Acorn from the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon running at the time. Okay, Sega. I guess at some point they realized they couldn't run with that lie for too long, but with that in mind, the story in the US manual becomes a lot more interesting. It starts with a friendly conversation between Sonic and Princess Sally talking about Little Planet, and how he intends to travel there for the sake of adventure. When they arrive on Little Planet, Princess Sally is kidnapped. I wonder how many kids this confused back in the day reading this and watching the animations that were included in the game. Post Sonic CD, we do see Amy's inclusion in a number of Sonic spin-offs like Sonic R and Sonic the Fighters. While we get no additional info on her background or origins within these spin-offs, I think it's worth talking about her Pico Pico hammer, which debuts in Sonic the Fighters. It was clearly added as a weapon to give her some diversity as a fighter in that game, but it would become a series staple in every appearance after this title. Although we still don't know where she got it from exactly, it was based off a popular Japanese toy with the phrase Pico Pico originating from the sound it makes when you whack it against things. And being the official weapon of Amy Rose, many characters within the Sonic franchise fear its wrath when Amy gets fired up. So that's what we know of her origins, and Amy of course gets a rather drastic redesign by Yuji Uekawa for the Sonic Adventure titles. I've mentioned him before as one of my favorite Sonic character designers to date. He delivers that straight quality bruv. They also bumped up her official age from 8 to 12, but I really don't think Sega cares about these ages anymore. In her Sonic Adventure appearance, there's actually continuity with the events of Sonic CD, with her reminiscing on being saved by Sonic. This title solidifies her character of obsessively going after Sonic's heart, though I do think there was some character development here of her reflecting on her own strength, and discovering her independence. She does become fully capable of tackling problems on her own, and is far from a damsel in distress, but we wouldn't really see them drop her reliance on Sonic until much later in the series, in my opinion. Moving over to the Archie comics, these publications pretty much leave Amy's origin story intact. She's introduced in the 25th issue during the comics adaptation of Sonic CD. Sonic has to rescue his biggest fan from Dr. Robotnik and Metal Sonic's clutches. As I've discussed in other origin videos, the Archie comic was heavily based on the ideas from the Sonic the Hedgehog Saddam cartoon, with Sonic being a part of the Freedom Fighters, attempting to take back the planet Mobius from Dr. Robotnik's oppressive regime. So while the events of Sonic CD occur pretty similarly, Amy's brought back to the Freedom Fighters and plays a support role amongst the Resistance as a more minor character for a while. As a side note, she wasn't included as a character in any of the Western Sonic media that was going on at the time. Later in this comic series, she utilizes an ancient magical artifact known as the Ring of Acorns, which was originally recovered by Sonic. Using the artifact, she makes a wish to be older, causing her physical age to increase. It was basically a plot device used to explain the new appearance of Amy that was mandated by Sega. From that moment on, she would be identical to her form in Sonic Adventure, and goes on to become a full member of the Freedom Fighters. Then we have the Fleetway publication, Sonic the Comic. This also uses the game continuity to explain Amy's origins, with the Little Planet incident being adapted to introduce her. Though this version of the comics makes her a little bit more capable, giving her a crossbow to fight back before her hammer was even introduced in the canon. She would soon become a major part of the Freedom Fighters, as well as even going on to becoming the second in command at times when Sonic wasn't around. I do like that the writers of this comic were ahead of their time at making Amy a force to be reckoned with. I also want to give a special mention to the latest Sonic comic series being published by IDW that started in 2018. And I do want to cover the IDW comics in a separate video. I just want to break them down because I really enjoy that comic series, but I think Amy's involvement is worth mentioning here. While she doesn't really have origins in this comic series since it's pretty in line with the games, it picks up in a separate universe after the events of Sonic Forces. So they're all dealing with the recovery efforts after the fallout of their war with Eggman. While various incidents occur during the recovery, Amy steps up to lead the restoration team and serves as a crucial part of getting the world back on its feet. Every character interaction she has with Sonic proved to me that this is one of the best versions of her character out there. And while she still admires Sonic, that admiration is no longer the driving force of her personality. She steps up whenever she's needed and has the strength to fight back in most situations. There's also moments where she takes the time to be vulnerable and vents about the stresses of leading the restoration and the toll it takes on her. I highly recommend the first few arcs of this comic series to anyone who truly loves the personalities of Sonic characters. I think it's the perfect rubric for each of them, and I'm hoping that Sega applies these human-like versions of the characters in future titles. And then last but not least is the 2003 anime Sonic X. This was an anime that was personally overseen by Sonic Team, so the characters here are pretty in line with their game counterparts at the time. So there isn't much origins to discuss here either, but the story involves Sonic and his friends getting caught up in an accident while trying to stop one of Eggman's plans, transporting them to Earth. This is where they meet the Thorndikes, a rich family who takes them in while they figure out how to get home. Similarly to her progression in the games, Amy is written to be striving for Sonic's love, but I think they made her extra fiery in this series, giving her independent moments at times. Strangely enough, this show has moments where it builds up the relationship between Sonic and Amy, where it seems like Amy eventually holds a place in Sonic's heart, but it feels like Sonic Team didn't really fully commit. So here's an example. Without going into too much detail, in episode 52, Sonic is the last one to get back to their original planet. His friends at this point are unsure if he was stuck on Earth forever. When he finally arrives, him and Amy have this really romantic drawn-out moment where she breaks down and expresses how she thought he'd never come back. He then gives her a rose in response and says he'll never leave her again. The Japanese version delivers this scene a little differently, while the end credits theme plays dramatically in the background. Amy makes a very similar speech to Sonic, but at the end of it tells Sonic to stop bullshitting and tell her he loves her. The audio then cuts out at this exact moment while Sonic mouths something while he presents the rose. That looks like a proposal to me, bruh. That or Sonic is just a fuckboy. Either way, Lord Future would be proud. So again, I think Sonic Team wanted to have something there without fully committing to it. Though in the Japanese version, Amy declares him as her boyfriend in the next episode and mentions she's his future wife. Whether Sonic agrees with this is not confirmed. By the way, as I was rewatching this scene in both English and Japanese, there's this weird shot in the Japanese version of a sign that says, "The House of Amy Rose," but in the English version, they show the same exact sign with like no text on it. How strange and pointless of an edit is that? Did the localization team just not like the idea of Amy owning property? Like, what happened there? If you have any reason why they would do that, leave a comment below. And yes, it was 4Kids that dubbed this in the US, the same company that ruined your other favorite anime like Yu-Gi-Oh! And One Piece. As a side note, if you plan to watch this series, always go for the Japanese version. It's leagues better.
Let us sniff the queen.
Unlike Sonic, he doesn't chuckle, it's our fighting freak Knuckles. Or as some kids used to call him, the Red Sonic. Knuckles has had a rather interesting characterization throughout the franchise, and with his inclusion in the second Sonic movie, I think we should brush up on his origin. Welcome to Origin Oracle, my children, the segment where I do a deep dive on the origins of video game characters. If you like this type of content, give that like button a nice homing attack. It truly goes a long way for the channel. Without further ado, let's dive into the lore of Knuckles the Echidna. Knuckles' first appearance was the moment where he punched the shit out of Super Sonic and stole all the Chaos Emeralds after Sonic and Tails pulled up to Angel Island. Funny enough, this seems to be how the two meet in Sonic Movie 2, a punch to the face. Anyway, this moment in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 actually has some backstory to it, with Knuckles being the sole protector of the floating island, Angel Island. His main purpose is to protect the Master Emerald housed within, an all-powerful jewel that is capable of unspeakable power and can keep the Chaos Emeralds in check. This duty was passed along to Knuckles by his ancestors, who in the past pissed off ancient gods and got annihilated in the process. So more on this in my Sonic timeline, you should go check that out. We love talking about ancient gods in Sonic lore. You don't fuck with ancient gods. Anyway, the surviving members of the clan ended up on the floating island, taking on the duty to protect the Master Emerald, rather than using it for their selfish reasons. The last member of that clan is lonely old Knuckles here.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
So based on the Japanese manual for Sonic 3, Knuckles was just chillin' peacefully on Angel Island, until the Death Egg from Sonic 2 came barreling down, crashing into the island and ruining Knuckles' weekend. He goes flying out of the shrine where one of the Chaos Emeralds was stored, while the island descends down to the earth after the impact. Knuckles rushes back to the shrine to find the Chaos Emeralds are gone, and can only run around helplessly as the gems he was tasked to protect go missing. He eventually meets Dr. Eggman, who tricks him into believing that Sonic was on the island to steal the emeralds. And that, my friends, is how we get to this moment in particular. Interesting, right? As a side note, there's no concrete explanation as to why the Chaos Emeralds are on Angel Island, while the Death Egg is crashing, because in that moment, canonically, Sonic should be using them to transform into Super Sonic to escape safely from the explosion from space. There's a lot of retconning going on in the games at the time when it comes to the location of the Chaos Emeralds, and you can argue there's multiple sets, but I think there's no concrete answer here. Before I continue, I think, like we did with Amy, we should discuss Knuckles' conception. Sonic Team knew from the beginning that they were going to be adding a new character to the Sonic franchise, while planning Sonic the Hedgehog 3. The series is already a major hit at this point, so it would work wonders for marketing with a brand new character. Character design was decided by an internal competition among the development team, with Takashi Yuda winning this battle to the death with a green echidna design. The original intention was to make him another friend of Sonic's, but the team wanted to be a little edgy and make him a rival instead, and give him the role of being an additional obstacle, even though Dr. Eggman would still serve as the major antagonist. Eventually they changed him from green to red, which served as a better contrast to Sonic and Tails' blue and yellow colors respectively. They'd also focus his abilities on strength, a respectable counter to Sonic's super speed. His appearance had the iconic dreadlocks, with Sonic Team initially hoping to give him a Jamaican accent instead. And I really envy the universe that got that version of Knuckles. I mean, come on, yo.
Tap your bumbo clot ballin' brethren, you big man, act like a big man.
So Sonic Team had a solid rival to Sonic with Knuckles, and would go on to implement him into the two-part third game of the series, Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, developing the lock-on cartridge technology that even gave players the ability to play as him in Sonic 2. It wasn't until the Hidden Palace Zone level in Sonic & Knuckles until the Red Echidna realized his huge mistake in trying to deter Sonic, as Dr. Eggman was the mastermind behind all the mishaps on Angel Island. With that, a mutual respect between him and Sonic is formed as they work together to end the Doctor once and for all. Until he comes back in the next game, of course.
Knuckles!
We'd see Knuckles again in the Sonic Adventure series, still true to his duty to protect the Master Emerald, as an ancient god known as Chaos that was sealed inside is released by Eggman. This caused Angel Island to fall again, triggering the events of Sonic Adventure as each character gets wrapped up somehow in Eggman and Chaos' villainy. Knuckles is given the ability to sense the pieces of the Master Emerald, and spends a majority of the game attempting to put the pieces back together. It's revealed in this game that the same ancient god that his clan pissed off way back in the past was indeed Chaos, which ties Sonic Adventure back to some of the lore earlier established in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But ever since the end of Sonic Adventure series and some mentions in the Sonic Advance series, Knuckles' duty to protect the Master Emerald is not exactly mentioned. In fact, it's rare to see the Master Emerald or Angel Island mentioned at all. Its last canon appearance, I'd say, is probably Sonic Advance 3, which was released all the way back in 2004. And you could argue that the last major appearance was Sonic Rivals 2, released in 2009, a series that I rarely talk about, so maybe someday. But anyway, it's fair to say that Sonic Team couldn't care less about Knuckles' duty at this point, but hopefully we'll start to see some mention of this in Sonic Frontiers, with Ian Flynn leading the writing effort. But Mentok, what about Knuckles' origin in other publications? Well, I'm so glad you asked. So let's start with the Archie comics. I'll start by saying our boy Ken Penders loves the lore of the Knuckles clan, but I'll keep focus as much as possible on Knuckles himself. He's introduced in issue 13, where the storyline is based around the events of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Unlike the games, Dr. Robotnik discovers Angel Island due to the energy of the Chaos Emerald being emitted, and he travels to get the emerald for himself. With Sonic and Tails in hot pursuit, they run into Knuckles when they arrive on the island, and he attempts to stop them from advancing, already being tricked by the cunning Doctor. So as I mentioned before, the Archie comics majorly deviates from the lore of the game, and gives Knuckles' history a much deeper backstory. In the comics, Knuckles grows up on Angel Island with his father, but still lives a rather secluded lifestyle. His father suddenly disappears before him one day in a wall of fire, which leaves him no choice but to take up the role as guardian of the island at a young age. You would later meet a character named Archimedes, a fire ant who Knuckles looks up to as he files into his duty as guardian. Eventually, Knuckles discovers Dimitri, one of his ancestors who was sealed off for ages, and this drove him to villainy. Also known as Enerjack, he would serve as one of the more popular antagonists outside of Eggman in the Archie comics. After Enerjack's reappearance, Knuckles begins to discover more of his kind, including a group known as the Dark Legion, a separate group of echidnas that left the original clan many years before. To take this a step further, Knuckles would actually find out that the entire echidna civilization was still alive in an alternate dimension. So you have to wonder if the Sonic movie plans to take inspiration from this. Ken Penders, the writer of the Archie comics at the time, created a separate Knuckles the Echidna comic, detailing more backstory with the Knuckles clan, even including a character that served as Knuckles' long-term love interest, Julie Sue. Julie Sue is originally from the Dark Legion, but defects due to her love for Knuckles, and toward the end of the comic's run, they start an official relationship, even in one possible future having a child together named Lara Sue. And if I start to talk about this any further, I'd probably get into the whole legal dispute between Ken Penders and Sega that took place, and maybe this isn't the video for it, but most of this lore was reset by the Super Genesis wave at the end of the Worlds Collide arc, which is a catastrophic event that was used to retcon a lot of the original Archie continuity. After this event, Knuckles would revert to being a tad closer to his game counterpart, and all legal issues aside, I do think that exploring the Echidna clans a little further in the video games themselves would make for interesting character development for Knuckles, but I don't see that happening again anytime soon. Next up is the Fleetway publication, Sonic the Comic, which also introduces Knuckles pretty much the same way as he's introduced in the games. The Death Egg crashes onto Angel Island just like it does in Sonic 3, with Robotnik tricking Knuckles to believe that Sonic is after the Chaos Emeralds housed on the island. So of course, when Sonic and Tails arrive, they get to scrapping, which gives Robotnik the opportunity to steal the set of 6 Chaos Emeralds that are hiding on the island. It's important to note here that the comic specifies there are multiple sets of Chaos Emeralds across their world, so with that in mind, Robotnik merges 2 sets of Chaos Emeralds, restoring them to their original state after being separated millennia before. This is when Knuckles realizes he's being tricked, and whips out a gray Chaos Emerald of his own to neutralize the power of the set that Robotnik has, and in turn manages to cast him off the island. This does lead to Robotnik returning again to try to steal the Master Emerald, which causes a chaotic situation for Knuckles, who has to defend the island from Robotnik and his robots, as well as a crazy Super Sonic who transformed from the energy of the Master Emerald. If you're confused as to why Sonic would even look like this, check out my What is Super Sonic video for some more details on that, because that form is bonkers. So soon after this, Sonic and Knuckles team up and successfully take down Robotnik, which cements his place as a major character in the comic's lore. At this point, he would continuously get wrapped up in Sonic's efforts to thwart Dr. Robotnik's plans. Very similarly to the Archie comics, Knuckles would also find out that he's not the last of his race to survive, meeting an Echidna scientist, Dr. Zachary, who would turn on Knuckles to destroy the Master Emerald, forcing Knuckles to find a new emerald to replace it. This leads to his next character arc of trying to discover the fate of his clan, meeting a pirate known as Captain Plunder, who promises to give him a chest filled with information on his people in return for helping him. While the captain holds up his end of the bargain, Knuckles is left stranded on a remote part of Mobius, where he has to try his best to return home. And when he finally does, he's involved in one more fight with Dr. Robotnik and Dr. Zachary. This version of Knuckles has it pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie. It's like he never catches a break. But if you're curious as to what happened to his clan, Nigel Kitching, the main writer of the comic, didn't get much of a chance to wrap this up before it finally ended. The last arc of the comic series was based around Sonic Adventure, but it took some liberties on Knuckles' past. He apparently lived thousands of years before and had been attacked by an evil empire known as the Draken Empire. Nigel stated if the series continued, he planned to reveal that the Drakons caused the end of the Echidna clan, and the remaining survivors were scattered across the galaxy, suffering enslavement on different planets. It's actually really interesting to see each publication's take on the fate of Knuckles' people, because outside of Sonic 3 and Sonic Adventure, Sega hasn't really given us much detail about the tribe, though I do think Sonic Adventure does a decent job on telling their story. But enough about the comics, let's move on to some animation.
Well, look at you! Look at you!
So normally I'd talk about the original Western Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, also known as Sadam, but Knuckles never ended up making an appearance in that show, or the more comical series Adventures of the Sonic the Hedgehog. His first appearance in an animation would be the Sonic the Hedgehog OVA, also known as Sonic the Movie in the West, which was produced under the supervision of Sonic Team at the time. It takes place in a totally separate continuity, with the plot being split into 2 parts, where Sonic is taking on Dr. Eggman and Metal Sonic respectively. Not much is said about Knuckles when he makes an appearance in this world, but he isn't a guardian of the Master Emerald like in the games. In fact, there's no mention of the Emeralds or Angel Island in this movie. He's simply a treasure hunter who's already familiar with Sonic and Tails, and helps them in their fight when he stumbles upon them during the plot. The rivalry between him and Sonic is also less of a highlight here, as they seem to get along pretty well in this movie, but there's not much more to his backstory either. but he's definitely a welcome entry into this movie because he helps tie up a few plot lines. If you want to see a deeper dive into this awesome OVA, go ahead and check my video out on this as well. Then there's Sonic Underground, a cartoon that ran in 1999 in the West. It had Sonic and his siblings Sonia and Manic as the main cast, and it surrounded their search for their mother Queen Alina, who was ousted from her throne by Dr. Robotnik, who on the flip side is trying to find them and eliminate them so a prophecy of his defeat will not come to pass. He eventually employs the assistance of Knuckles, tricking him so he would help him with his nefarious deeds. In this series, Knuckles is the guardian of Angel Island and the Chaos Emerald that's housed within. And soon enough, Knuckles realizes that Dr. Robotnik was after the Emerald the whole time, joining Sonic's side to defeat him and force him off the island, permanently becoming their ally. Interestingly enough, Knuckles has a great-grandfather named Altair in Sonic Underground, who he reaches out to for guidance and advice, but not much else is known about his lineage. So while some story elements from the games are used, this cartoon is pretty different from the main Sonic continuity as well. Then in 2003, the anime Sonic X was released, which is the animation with the closest plot to the game continuity in comparison to the rest of Sonic media at the time. While there's no backstory given regarding Knuckles aside from what we already know from the games, I wanted to give the anime props for emphasizing Knuckles' role as a guardian of the Master Emerald. In the final season of the series, he steps up continuously, using the power of the Master Emerald to assist the cast in their search for the Chaos Emeralds, and he's also a major offensive force with their fight against the Metarex, an alien species that seeks to use the Chaos Emerald for their own gain. And then finally we have Sonic Boom, which I rarely discuss since this doesn't have much of a plot in the first place. The show is a spin-off of a couple of games that went by the same name, but this is more of a comedic slice-of-life take on the Sonic cast in a separate continuity. Knuckles received a major redesign for the Sonic Boom universe, which led to more than its fair share of memes.
Meme! Approved!
They made him a lot buffer, and personality-wise, he lost whatever intellect he had left, turning him into the comic relief of the series in most situations.
Capable is my middle name.
I thought your middle name was The.
Now before I go further, I recommend anyone that wants a lighthearted take on the Sonic cast to watch this show. The writing is pretty clever at the end of the day, and most Sonic fans actually really enjoy this show for what it is. I felt the need to put Sonic Boom in this video to acknowledge the huge departure from Knuckles' original character that was put in this show. And while it has its place, I'm pretty relieved that we're not seeing this in the second Sonic movie. Speaking of which, at the recording of this video, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 has not been released, but he's now being played by Idris Elba, and will be taking on Sonic for what I surmise is the same reasons as the original games, being tricked by Eggman in some form or fashion. I have a few questions regarding where Eggman found him, and assuming it's on the mushroom planet he's exiled to at the end of the first movie, I want to know who these echidnas are that were originally after Sonic's power when he escapes his own world. Funny enough, in that trailer, Sonic says to Knuckles, "I'm not letting you have my power," which I think is a response to him recognizing his clan. And Knuckles' response is, "Do I look like I need your power?" Which makes me wonder if he's special in his own right, as his palms seem to glow red, similarly to how Sonic glows blue when he taps into his speed. Anyway, I'm excited to see where they take this movie, and I may certainly do a part 2 of this video to cover Knuckles' origin established in the movie lore. Excuse me for my trash audio, but I just want to say thank you to all the new subscribers that have come in over the last few weeks. This Origin Oracle segment has been a success, and I will be doing a lot more for every game series that I can think of. But in the meantime, like, comment, and sub if you haven't already. It goes a long way to support the channel. So for the algorithm, do that for me. And until next time, the Prophet has spoken.